Greetings, everyone. I hope you had a great week, or at least reasonably interesting and happy. With just 3 weeks left until the end of the year, I'm sure tension is rising and everyone wants a break. But our officials, our international officials, are keeping it interesting for us, even when we kind of feel dull because we don't feel like working so close to the end of the year. This week, the honor falls to the Secretary General of the United Nations, the honor being me talking about it today to you for about 10 minutes. And Mr. Guterres deserved this honor with a statement that basically told us we had human rights we were unaware of. And the way he did this was by saying that plastics are a threat to human rights. And I tried to think of some human rights that plastic use threatens, but I couldn't. So I went into a different direction and assumed that if plastics threaten some human rights, then I must have such human rights. And I had to think about it for a bit, but I came up with some rights that I apparently have, that we all apparently have, and that plastics are threatening. First and easiest, for me at least, was the right to not wear contact lenses. These are products of the petrochemical industry, and we all know where the first part of the name of that industry comes from. Petrol. So contacts are made from basically petroleum derivatives, and this makes them bad for us and our human rights. And I agree, because if you think about it, that's actually a right I have been violating myself for years, but that's because I wasn't aware of it. Now that I'm never putting contact into my eye again, because they dry the cornea, they dry up your eyes. That's irritating, unpleasant, and it could cause problems. They also contacts, that is, increase the risk of various eye infections if they're not handled carefully. And who cares about careful handling these days? I mean, we have other things to think about. Related to this right is another one, and that is the right to use wood and tortoise shells for glass frames, because this one, it's made from plastic. It's got some metal in it, but it's overwhelmingly made from plastics. I suspect the glasses themselves are also not literal glasses, but I can't be sure, so I'll leave them out of the conversation. This one has a lot of plastics in it, but let's not go there, because if we start, we'll never be able to stop, with the list of things that contain plastics. So, wood and tortoise shells. Think about it. Sustainable, because they're renewable. And there are plenty of both trees and tortoises. If you don't believe me, you should read the news report that NASA put out recently that the planet is getting greener. What does greener mean? More trees. So there will be plenty for the new sustainable glass frames. Tortoises, planet's full of tortoises. I mean, I haven't heard of them being an endangered species. There might be some endangered tortoise species, but we can leave them alone. There's plenty of regular ones to use. It's pity about the Galapagos giant tortoises, because just think about how many pairs of glass frames could just one single tortoise yield. But we can't, because they're dead. It's a pity. Speaking of the Earth's renewable resources, such as trees and tortoises, I discovered another right we seem to have, and that's the right to wear fur. Now, some of us would probably argue that we've never been, deprived of that right, that people still wear fur coats in parts of the world, and this is correct. It's a right we used to have, but then it was taken away from us, from most of us, by animal rights activists, because they thought this was animal cruelty. But they didn't think about sustainability and the curse of petrochemicals. If they had thought about it, they would have probably chosen animal fur as the lesser evil. I mean, there is no question about it, is there? If we have the right to wear furs, as we do, we should immediately start building a new animal farming industry for furs. I mean, not for food. Although probably minks could be eaten, and we should definitely check out their methane emissions, because if they're low, we should definitely switch from beef to mink. I mean, you get to wear the fur, and you get to eat low emission meat. Seriously, somebody should think about it, but probably not Greenpeace and WWF, which are bound to be against it. And I have no idea why, because they have been campaigning against plastics for decades. And now that the solution is staring them in the face in the form of animal farms, they'll probably be against it. I mean, there's no pleasing some people, is there? Continuing with the renewable resources line, it is apparently my right and your right to write with a quill. Quills are made from feathers. Feathers are renewable because the birds they belong to are sort of automatically renewable over certain periods of time, like all animals. So we should definitely go back to quills. I mean, who needs plastic single-use pens? Who needs electronic devices that are chock full of plastics? I mean, just think about the regular laptop or even a smartphone. It's plastics upon plastics. Should definitely do away with that and go back to quills. Possibly pencils, I'm not sure. But yeah, they're wood, but we'll need wood for glass frames. I don't know. Okay, let's leave pencils alone. Just go back to quills. Which brings me to what's perhaps the most important right we have. And the right that plastics are threatening and straightforwardly violating on a daily basis in millions of places on the planet. I'm talking about the right to die or suffer serious bacterial infections of the kind that are very popular in hospitals. And the way they are being prevented or at least mitigated is by single-use plastics. But if plastics are bad, and think about all this medical equipment that contains plastics, tubing, the paint and the switches and buttons, plastics. And that's not the worst. It's the single-use plastics that are the worst. And I'm sure you already know this, but I had to point it out. Single-use plastics, they are a plague on this earth, and they must be dealt with, meaning, we should stop using them. Not just straws, but, single-use gloves, single-use syringes, horrible waste, so much plastic every single day. Think about it. We should totally go back to multiple-use syringes that need to be sterilized, and their needles too. We should go back to organic threads for sewing wounds. I mean, we should go back to literal catgut, which I'm being told was never actually used for sewing wounds, but why not try? I mean, I have the cat. If I get a wound, if I cut myself, I can go to the emergency room with my cat to donate the gut for sewing my wound. If that's not sustainable, I really don't know what is. And then you have the right to die in the peace and quiet of your own home without plastic-ridden life support equipment. What else could one want from life if you think about it? But to get to this, to sort of reclaim our rights that we didn't know we had until a few days ago, we need to do something. And you know what this something is. It is a total, complete and most of all, immediate ban on everything plastic, especially in hospitals, clinics, and emergency rooms. With that, I'll leave you until next week, and I definitely can't wait for what news our government officials will have for us next week. Stay tuned for more. See ya!